everybody, welcome to my talk today. How do I get funding for a UK post-registration nursing course aimed at students, newly registered nurses, any registered nurses looking at trying to secure funding in the future? It is very expensive to self-fund academically accredited university courses, so there'll be lots of tips and I'll go through the different funding streams with you. Hope you find it helpful. Do check out my YouTube channel, Support and Career Development for Nurses, and also bear with me today because I've got new glasses, variofocal, so I'm a little bit like this trying to adjust to them, so hopefully we'll get through. So when you're looking at different funding streams, most NHS employers, health and social care employers, will pay for training and development, such as specialist study days, preceptorship, induction days, and statutory mandatory training. But when you're looking at master's level accredited courses, you're going to have to think about where you get your funding from. And there's different funding streams, which I'm going to go through. So I always think of it as internal funding. So asking your employer what funding is available that year, they will have allocated continuing professional development funding versus external funding, where you might look at an external provider and you have to be proactive and look for that yourself. So NHS education departments allocate the CPD funding, continuing professional development funding, for staff education and on an annual budget. And employers then allocate the budget to individuals following a training needs analysis where they look at service need and there has to be line manager authorization. So because there's annual budget set, you need to really think about getting your requests in, or think about the modules that you're applying for a year in advance to stand the best chance of accessing the funding. And looking at authorization, you need to involve your line manager and local educators as well. And as I mentioned, there will be an element of prioritising across service needs. So currently we have a lot of units that have expanded in ICU, for example, or if it was oncology, the same principles. You would need more post-registration courses. If you expand your beds and you need more staff, you may need more courses in a certain specialist area that would need to be prioritised that year. The chances of receiving funding are dependent on the amount of budget that year. So the more budget we have, the more chance you have of accessing that funding and being successful, and vice versa. If you have less funding, there's less chance. Also on the amount of people that are applying for funding. So if we have less requests that year, you're more likely to get your funding. And alternatively, there is external charities you can apply for funding, and if you go on their websites, they have really good information, and you have to meet the criteria for application. There are hundreds and hundreds of charities out there across the UK that will fund nurse education courses, dissertations, modules, so do check them out as long as you meet the criteria for application. And I have a YouTube talk coming out next week on increasing your chances of accessing funding for courses. That'll help you. Training bursaries, scholarships and awards. I've never seen so many national UK bursary scholarships and awards out there for nurses to access. Another funding stream that you may be interested in is a clinical academic post, and it may be advertised as a clinical internship, a studentship, fellowship or lectureship. And I have got a YouTube video, different research roles and how to become a nurse researcher, if you're interested, that explains those different terms. And essentially a clinical academic post allows you to combine working as a healthcare professional whilst undertaking academic studies. So they're usually advertised with the training programme. It's a paid post, and there'll be a number of study days as well awarded usually. So for example, an internship may be for an early career nurse who's thinking about research, and they may complete some research modules to see if research is for them, whereas a master's studentship would enable the person to complete a master's as part of that studentship. So, 4 top tips to help you. First top tip, find out about CPD internal funding opportunities and how to apply locally. Ask your line manager and educators, how do you apply for local funding for courses? Is it an online system? Is there a gatekeeper? How and when is information disseminated? What is the application criteria and process? Does it require line manager sign off? Is there a deadline, timeline? Do I need to register my plans in an appraisal? Is there a local waiting list? And how do I request study leave to attend university? Tip 2, look out for alternative external funding opportunities if needed. The Royal College of Nursing provides a very helpful list of national funding opportunities, bursaries and scholarships on their website. And while I was looking for PhD funding, I came across the Barber's Company Clinical Nursing Scholarship, and I was successful in securing PhD fees for a year or two. And so it's very, very helpful to look at those national lists, and I would spend a day or two, a day on writing out all the lists of charities and funding opportunity institutions, go on their websites, and then another day looking at my applications, because they can be quite complicated and different institutions have different themes and application criteria. It was well worth it though, because PhD fees are really expensive, so worth the time and the effort, but it was down to me to be proactive to do that. And then you've got charity and institutional websites that will promote those opportunities. I have found social media fantastic, especially Twitter, where one of the reasons I joined Twitter was because there was a fantastic sharing of information and funding opportunities, as they'll tweet out deadlines and promote them on social media. So do check out social media too. Third tip, look out for clinical academic posts and research opportunities, and UK government websites and employer websites should disseminate that information. National research training opportunities, so those lectureships, studentships, internships, etc., that include master's or PhD level courses and clinical academic posts. In England, we've got the National Institute for Healthcare Research, and then across the 4 nations in Northern Ireland, we have Health and Social Care Research and Development. Scotland, we have the Chief Scientist Office, NHS Research Scotland, and in Wales we've got Health and Care Research Wales. I'm doing this talk it's August now, gosh I can't believe it, August 2022, and just to be aware that websites change and names change, especially in government departments, so these departments may change, but there will be a department that will have this information on. Tip 4, thoroughly review application criteria and deadlines. Many external institutions allocate funding a year in advance, similar to CPD funding. It's important to know how to navigate communication systems to find the correct information, otherwise you'll risk missing out on a deadline for an application. And establishing how communication systems work over your first 2 or 3 years when you're registered, because you're going to start thinking probably about more education after 2 or 3 years. It's something that you can do when you're newly registered and onwards, to look at how those communication systems work, so you give yourself the best chance and looking at those available opportunities. Review local employer intranet sites, national institutional websites, and as I said, always adhere to the specific application criteria, otherwise you won't be shortlisted. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to have a talk out next week on how to increase your chances of funding a post-registration nursing course with lots of tips. If you have any comments on this talk or any other talks that you think would be helpful, do let me know in the YouTube comments, or you can contact me privately, DM me on Twitter or Instagram if you prefer, or on my website. So I hope you found the talk helpful today. Give me a like if you enjoyed it and you found it helpful, and good luck with your future aspirations.